just raising. I got a bounce in my step and I'm hanging south. New persona, I'm hotter than Arizona. My aura corona, and I'll be sicker than pneumonia. My name is Devin.
What's up, Wizards? Dev back again from mtg, that channel down there. I got a deck tech for you today. I've been talking about this one for like a week and I finally got it out. This is Budget Waste Not. Yeah, this is a really fun deck. If I listed fun factor in the power rankings, it would be like a 13 because I love discard decks. They've got a time-honored tradition in Magic the Gathering, and this one is just as fun as some of the other ones. So let's go ahead and hit it. Well, we can't talk about this deck without talking about Waste Not. We're playing, obviously, 4 copies of this thing. One thing that's worth noting about Waste Not is that whatever deck you're playing against, whatever they're more likely to discard is probably going to hurt them against you. For instance, if you're playing aggro, they're likely going to discard a creature if they don't discard a land because they've got a lot of creatures in their deck. Now, if they do discard a creature, you get a 2/2, which gives you board presence against them, something they do not want. Same thing goes with control. If they discard an instant or sorcery, a non-creature spell, which they have an awful lot of in control, then you get card advantage on them. And control, that's all they want is card advantage on you. So whatever deck you're playing against, whatever they're most likely to discard is probably going to hurt them. And almost no deck can give you that 2 mana. That 2 mana looks really innocuous. It's actually fantastic. It's almost turn advantage. If you can get them to discard a land, then you can usually keep it going, and that is all you need. I mean, that 2 mana looks like the worst mode on the card, but when they discard a land, it fuels you in a lot of ways. You can just keep going. 2 mana is more than you think it is. So Waste Not is actually pretty neat if we can get it to stick, if we can get our discard spells. Waste Not actually does a lot for us. It doesn't win us the game single-handedly, but it forces even harder decisions on your opponent, which is already tough decisions. Alright, now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about the creatures. We are running 16 creatures in this, and a fairly aggressive sort of early game is what we're going for. We're playing 4 Blood-Soaked Champion. We're playing actually, I think it's 9 1-drops, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, excuse me, 10 1-drops. So Blood-Soaked Champion obviously is really good. This will help keep pressure on. It has good synergy with a lot of the things that we're trying to do. Yeah, Blood-Soaked Champion. We need it for one of our only 2-drop creature. So yeah, I'd like to play Blood-Soaked Champion. Recurring creatures are always good, especially in something like this. And it's a warrior, which actually matters. We're also playing 3 Tormented Hero here in the 1-drop slot. Tormented Hero, not a great top deck later on in the game, but facilitates, again, the same 2-drop that Blood-Soaked Champion does. And, yeah, is also a warrior, which matters, but only for 1 card. I'll go ahead and let you know that. But Tormented Hero, good, you know, 1 mana, 2 power, 1-drop, helps us out early game, and has synergy with some of the other things that we're doing. So, yeah, I'll play this. Finally, let's finish off the 1-drop creatures here. 3 copies of Ruthless Ripper. This actually has a lot of really good interactions in this deck and is an early game board clogger. They don't want to attack into it. Really good to flip up, you know, that 2 life loss is actually a big deal. And you can catch a lot of people by surprise by flipping up Ruthless Ripper. Even if they're playing around it is hard to play around. So just because it helps our early game aggression out, which we kind of need for what we're doing here. And Ruthless Ripper does more than just swing in early game. It deters them a little bit, and we need all the, you know, extra turns we can get. So even if we get an extra turn out of some sort of combat hesitation, it helps us out tremendously. Well, some of you probably guessed by now when I alluded to this 2-drop. We're playing 4 copies of Mardu Skull Hunter. Skull Hunter is obviously a fairly aggressive creature and makes them discard a card. Now, this is a choose effect, which is good second, third turn, honestly. They have planned around their opening hand, and if you can just exploit, sort of just get rid of one of those cards and everything can fall apart. That's the thing about discard, is that if you get rid of 1, 2, or once it starts to get it, you've gotten rid of 3 cards in their opening hand, their whole original plan is shot to junk, and they can't really do much with it. So just Mardu Skull Hunter can really disrupt opponents, especially opponents that rely on slower moving games. And finally, finishing off the creatures, 1 copy of Sidisi Undead Vizier. Jafar does cool things for us in this deck. Obviously, we can sacrifice any of these creatures or Waste Not tokens for that exploit. He's a 5th copy of Waste Not for all intents and purposes, and he helps us dig for our removal, or maybe if we want to keep Waste Not going, helps us dig for a card that makes them discard more than 1 card. You know, there's lots of things you can do with Sidisi. And he's a threat in and of himself, a 4/6 body with the Death Touch too. So I like Sidisi for lots of reasons. Well, that's all the creatures. Let's go ahead and do the spells for you here. We're playing 19 of them, 3 of which in this budget build are Duress, and 2 of which are Despise. I'll go ahead and give you that because they're so similar. They're just exactly opposite. Obviously, Duress good against control, Despise good against aggro. It nabs creatures, Duress nabs non-creatures. So, yeah, I would say Duress a little bit better, hits more targets for us right now, but Despise, we can Despise something out of their hand early game and then hit it with a reanimation spell later on. So that's can be fairly good, and we can do that as early as turn 4 if the cards are played almost exactly right for us. So, yeah, I definitely like playing either one of these. Obviously, if you had a couple extra bucks, you'd play Thoughtseize, but even if you played 4 Thoughtseize, I'd still be down for playing at least 1 copy of Duress. It really is that good, especially in this format where even the aggro plays a large amount of spells. 2 copies of Ultimate Price, one of our only real removal spells in this all-black deck, which is kind of blasphemy, honestly, but we do have a fair suit of removal in the main and even more in the sideboard. But Ultimate Price is always good, and we see a lot of, Green Devotion, Mono-Red Aggro, things like that. So Ultimate Price has just gotten better and better as the season goes on, and I feel like we can afford to play the 2 copies in the main here. We do want to remove threats that do make it to the board. Let's play 4 Diplomacy of the Waste. You can get, 4, 6 damage off of this over the course of a game, depending on how many you play. You'll almost always have a warrior because a lot of our 1-drops are warriors and all of our 2-drops. So, yeah, I'd say Diplomacy is good. You get to choose any old card, and that is fantastic. Back in the day, we had a card named Coercion that did exactly this without the warrior clause stuck on the end there, and we played that and loved it. So I still like Coercion, and I love it even more when it does 2 extra damage to them. That's pretty hot. Playing 3 copies of an OG here. This is Mind Rot, and you knew you were probably going to see it. Cards that make them discard more than 1 card when you have a Waste Not out is ridiculous. These cards are crazy, honestly. I wanted to play 4 Mind Rot, but just really couldn't find the space. I'm sure that you can, finagle it, work it around, but any card that makes them discard more than 1 card is going to be bonkers if you have a Waste Not out. The board advantage gets crazy, the card advantage gets dumb, and if they discard lands, you just get more mana. Like, what happens sometimes is they'll discard a non-creature, you draw a card, discard a land, you get mana, and that's the worst thing they could possibly do. So, yeah, Mind Rot is good on its own, even if you don't have a Waste Not, because if it sticks against control, if it resolves, it's going to hurt them a lot, honestly. And against other decks, too. Devotion, they're going to have to discard 2, a lot of times big creatures that you can then reanimate a little later in the game. So, Mind Rot. 1 copy of Murderous Cut here in the main deck. Yeah, Murderous Cut speaks for itself. We're playing a fair amount of things that either die or are just non-creature spells. Obviously, our creatures are going to die a fair amount. And this doesn't have great synergy with, say, Bloodsow Champion. We do have another Delve card in the deck, too, aside from this. But I still say that we play enough things to where we can get this down to 2, 3 mana fairly reliably. And it's unconditional, which is awesome. 1 copy of Stain the Mind. You don't see this too often, although you do see it occasionally. Stain the Mind is crazy, especially in a thing like this, where you can just get rid of their best threat forever and ever and never have to worry about it. I don't have to talk too much about this here. We've got plenty of creatures to make that convoke cost thing, I think. That's one of the reasons I put creatures in, is for 2 different cards convoke costs. And among other things, Diplomacy of the Waste, blah, blah, blah. But still, yeah, Stain the Mind is a lot better than people think, and it's gotten a little bit more play here in the recent history of Magic. So I do like Stain the Mind, especially in something like this, sort of tailor-made for it. Just the 1 copy of Tassiger's Cruelty. Again, this is a thing that makes them discard 2, and it has Delve. Late game, this will be fantastic against control. And again, anything that makes them discard more than 1 card is great. And we can play this for the 1 black mana more often than not a little bit later in the game. Not even that late, honestly. So, yeah, I like at least the 1 copy of Tassiger's Cruelty, but I couldn't fault it if you wanted to make it 4 Mind Rot and no Cruelty. That would make sense, too. And to finish off the spells, 2 copies of Endless Obedience, the reanimation I keep referring to. Yeah, this is Convoke, which we have creatures for, and it's pull a creature out of any graveyard and put it under your control. That's pretty hot, honestly, in a discard thing, and in a format where everyone's playing ridiculous creatures right now. So I'm all for Endless Obedience, and, testing it out, I think that maybe even another copy. This card is actually really, really good in this format right now because people are discarding crazy stuff against you. All of our creatures are so good. And again, we have creatures to make that convoke cost an actual thing. So I think Endless Obedience is fantastic. I'll go ahead and tell you that we're playing 22 Swamps. I think that's fairly important here. Yeah, the deck is somewhat hungry in the late game, but we'll get the lands because we draw cards off of Waste Not fairly often. Also, games tend to go long just because we are making them discard a bunch of cards, and so their game plan changes over and over. They sort of have holes in their offense and their defense. So games tend to go long in a deck like this, and we can get the lands when we need them. Let me go ahead and toss the board up here. The board, I think, it's a fairly flexible board is all I'm going to say, although I think we've done a good job here. More removal, a couple more creatures in the board. Obviously, Tormod's Crypt goes in there against all the graveyard manipulation strategies that we see. At least 2 copies of that, I think. So, yeah, this is a fairly standard board. There's a couple of things I would say if you had money. Bile Blight could go in this. And in the main board, of course, we want Thoughtseize, we want Liliana, we want the new one from MTG Origins, too, for that matter. And we want, premium removal, Hero's Downfall, again, Bile Blight. So, if you had a couple of bucks, you could really spruce this up and make it fairly nice, I think. There's a lot of cool stuff that you can do with this. Again, the fun factor in discard decks is always off the charts. There are some pros and cons here. Well, on that note, I'll go ahead and throw up the power rankings for you. I know that's why you come here. So, obviously, fairly good games against control, but it does fuel their Dig Through Time, their Treasure Cruise, their Murderous Cut, what have you. So, do watch out for that. But it does force decisions, and especially at F&M, where the pool of players is not Pro Tour level or anything. Forcing decisions is a very important thing to do, because there are some players that even if they know the right decision, it's hard in the moment to sweat it out and make the correct decision. This really forces pressure on people in a whole different way, so it's got that going for it, but there are some problems, aggro, especially game 1, hurts it, and a lot of discard decks throughout history that have been good have relied on creatures that force discards through combat damage, and we really don't have any good creatures like that right this second. So the deck loses a little bit of consistency there. It can just end up being a jumbled mess, and even if you make them discard a couple of cards, sometimes you never get your Waste Not or you never get your removal, and they just run you over. It happens occasionally. So this deck does definitely have pros and cons. But that being said, I want to know how you guys feel about it. I know this is a deck that a couple of people were pretty excited for, and it plays pretty well when it goes off and it does everything it's supposed to do. It's a really good, really fun deck, and it makes them facepalm like every other turn. So I recommend at least giving it a shot. Let me know what you guys think of it. It'll cost you about 20 bucks to make this deck off a TCG player, which is a more than fair price, I think. Waste Not was surprisingly expensive. I think it's like $2.75. Expected it to be like $1. So, yeah, I imagine you already have a fair amount of these cards. So, give it a shot. Let me know what you think. Like, share, comment, and subscribe if you haven't done all that yet, or if you haven't subscribed yet, do that. My next deck tech is something I'm super excited for, so it's going to be a budget build of the Rally the Ancestors thing that we see going around Standard right now. I love super bomby, crazy combo Reanimator decks. I played Human Reanimator for like 8 months a couple of years ago. Loved that deck. So I absolutely adore stuff like this, and I've made a budget build of it that'll only cost you about $30 some odd to make. So tune in, subscribe for that, and keep checking in with us. Like, share, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you kids next time. My name's Devin. I'm from Strictly Better MTG. Thanks for watching, Wizards.